thanks for anybody who's coming back to see my second presentation. Hopefully we'll be strung together a bit better than the first one. We have some technical issues to deal with, but we'll try and overcome those. At the moment we're using a mobile phone, Join Me, and 2 laptops, so it's going well. So we've got this Sitecore Nirvana, but really what we talk about is continuous integration, automated deployments, that sort of stuff. So say automated deployments, we'll say I'm from Hedgehog. So we are going to be looking at how TDS and Razzle sit into this stuff. So who's heard of Hedgehog development? Who's heard of Hedgehog? The company? All the hands up. No. All right, cool. Okay, well, so just a bit about Hedgehog. We are a Sitecore technical partner and a solutions partner. So we both deliver front-end solutions to clients, and we also deliver technical products like TDS and Razzle to the developer community. So we get to see both ends of it, which helps us deliver our products. We have 4 MVPs on the staff, which I am one. We've got Sean Kearney, Sean Holmesby, and Charlie as well. And we've won quite a few awards, which is always nice. And so hopefully that means that we have a deep Sitecore knowledge. Don't challenge me on that one. You've proved wrong. Cool, so I'm Mike Edwards, been a Sitecore developer for about 8 years, an MVP since 2011. And obviously I do the Glass Mapper project, which some of you might have seen earlier. And I'm also developing TDS and Razzle, trying to make it better. So what we're going to talk about is doing automated deployments to live and staging. Because basically I want to look at how we can try and remove the errors that developers make, and also just to remove the whole process of deployment as much as possible. So I'm going to show you what I've come up with. Some of this is sort of proof of concept stuff. We've developed some build tools that you'll be able to take away and use with MS Build scripts for you to play with and hopefully extend. The code that we're going to be releasing is going to be open source, so you can branch it on GitHub and customize it to what you need it to do. Fill in any bugs you do find. That'd be awesome. But primarily what I'm going to try and show is that we can create automated deployments that are just like a single click to deploy to live, to deploy to staging. We don't have to get involved. The one caveat to that is that in this demo there is a lot of waiting for things to happen. And that's not just because we're using an internet connection over the mobile, it's also the server itself trying to catch up. But I say we want to automate all the things because developers are lazy and we just want to sit back, click a button. So these are the tools that I'm going to be using. Team Development for Sitecore, obviously because that's going to get all my Sitecore items into my solution and allow me to package them up and deploy them to an environment. We're going to look at how we can use Razzle to sync to environments. I don't know if anybody saw that the latest release of Razzle went out about 2 weeks ago. We included scripting for that. So now you can call Razzle from the command line to pull your items from one instance to another instance. So I'm going to show you how I've used that in a small way in this demo. We're going to use Sitecore Ship. Who's heard of Sitecore Ship? Cool. Who's used Sitecore Ship? No one. Okay. Sitecore Ship is a way of deploying Sitecore update packages across HTTP, and it also allows you to do publishing as well. So it's a very useful tool for if you're on a live instance that's sat away from your build server. You can use something like TDS to package up, make that update package, fire a HTTP request off at Sitecore Ship on your live box, boom, it's there. I'm going to be using Sitecore Sim. Who's using Sitecore Sim? Wow, surprisingly, not as many as I thought. Right, there are a lot of takeaways, but if one takeaway you want to do is go and download Sitecore Sim, all right? This tool is amazing if you're running lots of Sitecore instances. 2-3 clicks, you can then set up a new instance, it installs it all for you, configures your databases, everything. If you want to delete an instance, right-click, delete. That's it. You don't have to worry about going in and attaching databases, setting up IIS, configuring your host file. It does all of that. It really is a massive time saver for any developer. And I'm using Sean Holmes's data folder extension for this demo. For those of you who do use Sitecore Sim, the data folder extension actually puts the location of the data folder in an include file instead of actually altering the web config, which is the better way of doing it. I'm going to be using Tomb City as my build server, but you could use any build server. Because what I'm supplying is just MS Build's tasks, so they just become part of your build script on any of the servers. And I'll also be using Git as my source control system, just personal preference, and because it's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go straight into the demo, and not the slide. So I'm going to sit down for this, take a seat, and while it all crashes. How do I get on the demo? Cool, right. Okay, so I'm a new Sitecore developer. I'm a new developer to this project, and I've come to my machine for the first time. And I've got to get a site up and running for with Sitecore in it. I've got to deploy the code. I've got to get the items in there. So what I can do is there's no site actually on here at the moment. My machine is just blank. I've got Sitecore Sim set up already for me and these build tools, but that's it. So what I can do is I can download from source control my solution. I can hit deploy. With the modifications we made to the build script, you can see here that actually it's gone away and it's gone called Sim Console because it's detected that I haven't actually got a Sitecore instance installed on my system. So it's now actually installing that instance for me. So this takes a little bit of time, but it only takes a little bit of time the first time, obviously, because after that we've got it installed. But it does mean that any developer coming to your project doesn't need to spend all that time opening up a solution, setting up their Sitecore instances, setting up IIS, trying to guess what connection string settings they should have. This is where the first demo got to go wrong. All right, so it's still deploying. So if we look at let's look at the output and see where we are. What we can definitely tell is that the demo gods did not like me today. Okay, so now we can see it's deploying all the Sitecore items. So to be clear, it's installed a clean Sitecore instance of, I think, 7.1 or something like that. It's deployed my code, it's deployed my items, and as a new developer, I can then come to this site, and once it refreshes, you'll see that now I have my Sitecore instance. But all I've had to do is I just downloaded that from source control, hit deploy, it built my Sitecore instance for me. I didn't have to do anything else. I mean, that doesn't get much easier than that. So let's add a change. So that's all nice and good, but as a developer, we're busy adding features. So we'll just build this and see if we get some dates added. So hopefully, at the moment I don't have any dates on my events. So we'll just, sort of typical developer lifestyle, add some code, check it works. Right, I'm going to check this in. But once I've made this change, I want this change to get to my staging server really quickly so that my QA team and my client can see this change out there and give me some feedback. Especially if you're in an agile development cycle, you want to be really letting the client see what you've done on a daily basis almost. And in some situations even faster. I remember one place we were doing it where we could make a change, deploy it, and the client could see it within 15 minutes of us actually checking the commit in. So to do this, I have my build server, which is a staging build, and it hasn't triggered itself yet. Let's hit run. We'll get to it manually. And what my staging build is going to do, first off, if we look at the build log, is it's going to actually go and tear down the existing staging site there. Because what I want it to do, if we follow the bottom, is I want a clean staging environment from scratch when I've deployed this. That's just a thing I wanted to do to make this more challenging. So I'm not building on top of an existing Sitecore solution. I'm completely removing it. So we can see here that SIM's been called, and now SIM is deleting the existing instance on that box. And then we'll use SIM again to pretty much do what we did on the developer machine. We're going to install a new Sitecore instance. We're going to deploy our code, and then we're going to deploy our Sitecore items. So that when the content editors and the content team come back to this environment, they see everything clean again. There's no clutter from previous testing that might get in the way. Now, of course, this is going to be an intensive task. So you may want to do this as like your nightly build kind of process, rather than your daily or CI build process. I mean, how many people are using build servers to deliver their solutions now? Cool. A few? Okay. How do other people deliver their solutions? Are you still just sort of packaging up zip files or just using publish? How many are doing it via zip files or like manual file deployment? Okay. And how many people are doing it through zip files? Through publish targets, Visual Studio. Okay. I think if you have the time, it's definitely worth investing in a build server. Because then you can start putting version numbers on there automatically from the build server. When that comes to bug tracking and release tracking, it's such a lifesaver. A number of times we've had clients come back to us and say, oh, I thought that was fixed in this release, blah, blah, and we go onto the box and then we realize, oh, actually, for some reason, that server has a version behind than what it should be. But we wouldn't know that unless we'd actually put version numbers on there. Otherwise, we'd have to hunt around in the source code and try and find out what version of the source code was on that box. Having a version number does that all for us. So you can see there was a brief bit where we saw Sitecore Sim do its install. It seemed to do it very quickly. Fingers crossed this has gone right. But now it's installing the Sitecore TDS connector. And then it will start to copy everything across. Cool. So once it's deployed all my new changes and all my new code, the next thing I want it to do is actually go to live and grab the latest content from live. Because what I want to do is I want my content editors to see the staging environment with real content. Because you saw my dev environment, I had all this test code here. I've got these test graphics and this test text, and that's fine for developers. But content editors like to see things as they're going to look once they're finally on the live box. I mean, we've probably all had those conversations with a client where you've put lorem ipsum in, or you've tried to go, this is only a test design. They're like, oh yeah, but that's spelt wrong. You're like, yeah, but it's only test content. It doesn't matter. And they focus on spelling mistakes and image width issues rather than actually the functionality. So we're going to bring all that content back. So our build is finished. And this is like the... Give me a second, and I'm going to try and work out. The only thing is I sat in Kern's demonstration at the back testing this, going, it worked all right. And I think I probably used up my one good chance of... Okay, so what I can do, this is Sitecore Sim, for those who haven't seen it. And we can see for some reason, my staging instance hasn't installed. So we come back up. It said it was okay there. Anyone want to guess? It's probably... Sometimes I find that Sitecore Sim doesn't do a delete properly, which I think is probably down to IS hanging on to certain things, getting a file lock so it can't try it. It's like this here. We have a file lock so it can't do the delete properly. So this is the quick way of doing an IS reset. Let's give it another whirl. We'll see if it runs this time. So interesting fact, if people are doing, if you're doing deployments to live and you need to recycle IS, but you don't want the monitoring tools to be set off, like if you've got HTTP ping, just terminating the W3 WP process won't set the HTTP warnings off. Because IS hangs onto the incoming request and goes, well, I'll wait until the next process is spun up. So in my last job, that's how we got around a lot of the, we got around deployments by that way. No. Okay, for some reason we now have...
You can't deploy CDS items if you have a 500 error.
That's normally a result of, so in this case the problem is that the site's not being installed correctly, unfortunately, by the build agent, so there is no endpoint to connect to. I'm going to give it one more shot. So it says it's installing it. If it takes a long time, we know it's doing it right. If it suddenly does it, we know it's done it wrong. So, so I say this is sort of trying to push the limits of where we're going with deployments. But in the long run, I think this is where like a lot of the bigger solutions are going to be. I know there are certain clients now who are also doing like multiple deployments to live a day because they've completely automated their solutions from check-in to going live, and they're now doing like 4 or 5 deployments a day. And the nice thing for them is they've actually got a client who is happy for them to do that, which I think for some of us may be difficult because there is an inherent instability if you're doing regular live deployments like that, and a risk to doing that. But if you're like someone like Stack Overflow, and those guys kind of do, they kind of go, well, we'll take those risks, but we'll rather get the code into live where we can get real-world testing of this stuff than have it sitting in our code base for 3 or 4 weeks, waiting for a test team to be free to actually do the installs, to actually test the code, make sure it works correctly. Let's just get the real people doing. Yeah. But that also means that you have to have a robust testing mechanism like test-driven development, which it wasn't many hands earlier for those doing test-driven development. So who's doing TDD or just doing a unit test in general in Sitecore? One hand, come on. Okay. Why is that? Does anyone volunteer a reason why they're not doing testing? Is it budget, generally, or? Yeah, just, okay. Because it is hard sometimes to sell the client on why should he? Because the client goes, well, just don't put the bugs in, you know. It doesn't work quite like that. Right. Hold your breath. But it's more encouraging because it's taking longer, so it hasn't just gone fall over straight away. Do any of you do like browser-based testing, like Selenium scripts or anything like that as well? Okay, a couple of guys. Have you thought about automating those? There's the ability to export them into C# and then run them through the web server there. Okay, so it's loaded. Unfortunately, the copy over from live hasn't occurred, which is really frustrating. But yeah, this is always, when you're at the cutting edge, you end up bleeding sometimes, don't you? So we'll move on. So the next thing obviously is once we've got it into staging, we want to get this to live. Now, unlike my staging instance can be seen via UNC path from my build server. So I can just use a standard TDS way of syncing items to push things out to my staging environment. But my live environment is probably in a DMZ somewhere. You know, my build server doesn't have file path access to it. We don't really want to open that hole into our firewall. So the best thing we can do is now do it via an HTTP connection. So my live site, let's just make sure that the live site is up and running. Cool. So yeah, site about cats. So now we're just going to try and ping this out to that site. And so this is going to use the Sitecore update package to actually install it this time. So all my files, all my items are going to be put into this update package and pinged across the World Wide Web to my service, which is also great if your your CDNs are in a remote remote location, distributed location around the world. So you might have a couple of servers in Australia and a couple of servers in America and some in Europe. You can still use a one build server and just ping the update packages across to them. If you were going to do this though, you have to think about load balancing and how do you pull things out of load so that when you deploy to them, you're not booting users off halfway through a process, especially like if they're halfway through a shopping cart and you just rip the server they're on from underneath them, they're not going to be happy, and your client's not going to be happy. So if I was to do something similar to this in real life, I would probably have something like a build for each server. So, like live 1, live 2, live 3. And then I'd contact my network guys and I'd say, right, can you guys take live 1 out of load, tell me when it's drained properly, and then once they've told me that, I go, right, I'll click deploy, and it will deploy to that environment. And if we just look at the build log, let's have a look at the build log.
Or have them push the button.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah. Especially if it's a midnight deployment. Yeah. Get them to it. Okay. So that seems to have built correctly and pushed everything out. I won't dive into that too deep, but so we can push it out. So yeah, so say we have live 1, live 2, live 3, and we just take things in and out of load to push to them. Obviously though, if you are doing that solution, you still then have to deal with the issue of some of your servers are going to be old code, some of your servers are going to be new code. If you're not doing sticky sessions, what happens when somebody changes from the new server to the old server and vice versa? So then you might want to look at strategies where you take sections of servers out. So you divide your environment into 2 at a load period. So you know that half the environment can handle the traffic at that time. And you say, right, I'm taking that half out. I'm going to upgrade those half by just hitting build, build, build. And then I'll put them back in load. At the same time, I'll take out the old servers. And do that.
You're deploying the files, etc. Yes. And the Sitecore items.
Yeah.
Is that to a delivery or a content master? The items.
So I'm publishing to content master. So the update package will install to the master database. Yeah. But if you use Sitecore ship, there is an additional call that allows you to do the publish. So that's a good question, and we'll bring that up now. So if we look inside SIM here, and this is inside my build file, which is included as part of my TDS build file. So my TDS solution, you can see here. In here, I've edited this project to reference this build file. And then if you can see at the top, if that goes away, you can see here we've got these custom build tasks. I mean, how many people are familiar with MS Build files? Cool. Like XML wizardry, these, especially when you come to these sort of conditions. They're always a bit fun to write. But this is how we're defining everything. So we can see we've got our sim delete. And actually, I'm only deleting my target instance when I'm not on debug and I'm not on live. So if I'm building to staging, it's going to delete it. Otherwise, it's going to be ignored. Then we have our sim install. And this sim install task calls a sim console, which is another custom app we wrote, which then calls the underlying sim API. Unfortunately, you can't call the sim tool exe file directly itself to access its API because it doesn't expose any parameters that allow you to do this. So we wrote something to allow us to do that. And configuring it is quite simple. You just say, that's where the console app lives. As you can see here, I'm using $Sitecore web URL to define the target folder I want to deploy it in. That value was actually pulled from TDS because we're in the TDS project, so I pulled it from TDS. So once you've set this file up, I don't have to keep coming back in here to edit it every time I change my environment settings. It just knows where it is from TDS itself. And then we can say which Sitecore version we want to install. And we've also added the ability to specify modules. So you could say, right, I want Sitecore 7.1 install with WFM and any of the other Sitecore modules. And it would just go away and just install all of those from the command line automatically for you. So we do that before we do any of the building. And then after the building, this is when we deploy to our target instance. So we have the first part here, which is where we're creating our update package. So if it's in live, I create an update package, and I just tell it that's my host. That's where I want to fire it to, and it's going to go across there and shoot it out. And then this is the second bit where we say publish. And you can see here, when we do a publish, we can say what mode we want it to do it in, where the source database and target database is going to be. So that might be different. If you're doing, as I was saying, breaking up your servers and stuff, you're probably going to have multiple web databases as well. Normally you might marry them up, so you have live 1, you would have web 1, live 2 would have web 2. So they come in pairs. And then we can say what languages we want to publish. Obviously, I only speak English, so we're doing that way. So it's hopefully rather straightforward to set up that whole process. You can just copy and paste that into your project, update the parameters, and you're good to go. In terms of actually setting the build tasks up, MS Build is actually really simple to add extensions to. I didn't realize how simple it was until I started doing this project, and I was surprised by how simple it is. Because I always imagine MS Build to be a bit of a black box of magic to me. So it's doing some crazy stuff with C# and compiling, I don't know. But it has a very simple API that you can hook into, where you just have a task which has an execute method. And you just implement the execute method in C#. I was quite surprised. And then to actually let MS Build know it exists, you just drop them into your MS Build folder in program files. And then just set up the references at the top. So yeah, so you see the MS Build extension path, that's your x86 directory location. And then you just say which task you want to refer to in a similar way that you do within the Sitecore XML configuration. Just namespace and assembly. So it's very simple to set up. The nice thing about having that set up as well is that if I look in my source control system here, you can see I've got this awesome branch. And you might have a client come along to you, and you're deploying regularly to staging off your master branch. And then they come along and go, oh, you know that awesome feature you were working on? Well, we want to see that now. And you'd be like, well, we've only got staging at the moment, and you're testing something else on staging. We don't want to overwrite that. And they're like, yeah, but we want to see both. Well, with this solution, actually setting up a new environment is pretty straightforward. Because all the settings can be configured from TDS. So if I close this solution, to keep the client happy, all I need to do is I can just check out awesome. Let's open the solution. We're going to update the properties. So he said, all right, I want something on staging. So I could come into here, and rather than just being staging.single, I'm going to call it awesome at the front. I've changed my deployment folder location, and so I just check that in to my source control set. So now it's pointing at a different location to my staging location. So once I've made those couple of changes, I can come on to my environment here. Let's get the staging one. Let's copy that across. Edit configuration settings. Let's give it another name. Just update the version control root. Because we're now pulling from a different branch. For those who use TeamCity, this is like, if you forget to check that, it's just a pain, nightmare. You muck everything up. All right, and let's run it. Okay, so now, because we know that the staging build will build an instance from scratch, and we also know that it's pulling the information on where that instance should be created from TDS. That was all I needed to do to actually get a new instance created from scratch with all the content there. If the Razzle component, which unfortunately isn't working now, would have got all our content back from live as well. But that's took in 3 or 4 minutes to do, and the client would have a new staging environment up and running and be able to see this other feature in a separate environment to their original set of features. So you can give the client a lot more flexibility about what they see and when they see it. The one caveat that is you need to check out your Sitecore licensing, because you are creating a new Sitecore instance in your staging environment. So you just have to make sure you've got enough licenses to cover the creation of those instances. I feel like there's like a terms and conditions, star. Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back and see that in a few minutes because it has got to build a whole new instance. So let's go back to the slide deck. So this is the basic process we're trying to cover. The developer checks in their code. Everything goes to the build server, code and items. It gets pushed to staging. Our content team are continuously just editing stuff in a happy world. We pull everything in. Now, I'm actually saying here I'm going to be using the history engine for pulling in, because I only want the latest stuff, say, within the last 30 days rather than everything. If you have large instances, then copying all the content over, well, completely destroying your instance and then copying the content over is just going to take too long. I mean, it could take all night if you've got millions and millions of items in your Sitecore solution. So what might be a better solution is to deploy your latest code from your development branch onto staging, but then use the Razzle history engine tool to just pull the last 2 or 3 days, or whenever the last deployment happened. So that way you're only pulling 2 or 3 days worth of items in, keeping it refresh and up to date, but without having the whole overhead of copying everything across. And then finally, once we've got it all set up, it's all there, good to go. The next morning, your testing team will come in, and or the client will come in, and they'll be able to see everything up there, looking shiny and brand new. You look great, and they're kept happy. Just as about how many people have dedicated test teams? Okay, quite a reasonable number. My girlfriend's a tester, so I have to say this, but they're awesome, so just... Seriously, if you've ever worked in places that have dedicated testers, they have a different mindset to developers. Like developers like, yeah, let's play with this and get out the door, and then I want to play with a new thing, so I'm looking over there. And whereas the tester's like, yeah, but you haven't, you haven't implemented that quite right. There's an exception here, and you're like, oh, all right, fix that. Yeah, because they're all about detail, and what we loved about having a dedicated test team was that if they said it's all right, then we were pretty happy that we'd done something of a good quality, because we knew that if they didn't catch it, the client wasn't likely to catch it, because they love making our lives miseries. Don't tell I said that. Oh, it's on camera. Okay, let's see if. So hopefully we don't get a 500, and we should see our new awesome site has come up. Dum dum dum. Again, it's taking its time, so that must be a good thing. Hey, so we got a new test site up. We've got a carousel on this one. But I only did it, updated two values in TDS, copy the build config point, update the version control setting. That was it, a few steps, get a new environment. Okay. So if you want to find more, we've detailed different processes and different ways of setting these sort of deployments up. You can register, there's a white paper, I think it's about 23 pages long, where we've detailed different ways of doing this, so you can download that from this URL, and that will give you more like a step-by-step guide of how I set this up and how you can do it yourself. We'd love feedback on this as well, and I say we are releasing the code as an open source solution. So if you want to get involved in that and looking at how we can really push the whole automated build process, that'd be brilliant. I do recommend that if you can, automating your builds will save you so much time and a lot of headaches. There's nothing better than, as a developer, knowing that when you hit that build process, it actually gets out there sensibly and correctly, and you don't have to sit there for 2 hours manually copying files over, or trying to hunt down the dev who forgot to check in the critical item that makes the whole solution work. Yeah, it just makes life good. Okay, so thanks for listening. If you want more information, follow me on Twitter. And I'll be putting out through my Twitter account when I've put that build stuff up there. Obviously, go to the Hedgehog website, download TDS. You can get a trial version for those who aren't using TAS or Razzle. And then follow my blog if you want any, for just random stuff. Sometimes I blog on there. But there's also information there about a bit more about the Razzle scripting tool itself, and also some of the more features we're bringing into TDS. Cool. So again, finally, I should say thanks to the sponsors. Thanks to the internet for holding up better than it did in my first presentation. And thanks for everyone for coming and listening. Has anyone got any questions? Is everyone going to go and buy some licenses? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I think we got. Is there anything else we need to do? Okay, cool. Thanks, everyone.